Well, glad you're here. I graduated from college in a unique way. I was actually a dual major in college, which essentially means I had 2 Bachelor's of Arts degrees. The first was in performance. Don't get too excited, okay? The first one was in performance communications or acting, and the other one was in religion philosophy, which means this: based on the degrees that I have, I am qualified for nothing. Except for what I do right now. Like, if I don't do this, I am homeless. That's what it comes down to. I'm a little surprised why my parents allowed me, actually, to pursue the degrees that I did. But nevertheless, they've actually served me quite well as a pastor. I mean, my degree in performance communications has helped me with public speaking and creative content and stuff like that. And, my religion philosophy degree kind of speaks for itself. But at the end of the 4 years of study that I did, I was asked to do a final project for each degree. And the final project I had to do for my performance communications degree was to perform a compilation of monologues from different genres of theatrical performances, put them together, perform them, and whatnot. And for my religion philosophy degree, I was asked to write a final paper documenting what I had learned while I was in that program. And so my monologues were a big piece of cake. I compiled them and I rehearsed them, developed characters, and blocked each of them out. It was a piece of cake. But my final paper for my religion philosophy degree was difficult. I mean, there's a lot when you think about all the philosophical writings and religious writings in the world to pick from. And we covered a lot of ground in that program, and there was so much to choose from when it came to what I had learned while I was getting that degree. But in the end, my papers focused on how my studies in the program essentially taught me that I can have an opinion or a position on just about anything as long as I believe it to be true. In essence, my paper was on what we refer to as relativism. Seems like a big word. Let me explain, okay? Relativism essentially says that there are no absolute truths, right? That truth is only what a particular person or culture believes. So my paper focused on how my studies at school taught me how to make everything I believed relative to the way that I wanted to live. Right? Now keep in mind, I didn't actually believe what I was writing. I was just telling them what I learned. That you can basically believe whatever you want and get away with it. That's what relativism is. And I argue that in light of relativism, I can do and say and believe just about anything I want, and you can't argue with me. So relativism seems like kind of a nice concept, right? It means that we can have our own opinions and we can share, different positions on different subjects. And there are things where that is true. It can be a really good thing for us. But, there's one area where this gets really sticky. When you start to talk about, you can believe what you want to believe and I can believe what I want to believe, is when it comes down to morality. What's right and what's wrong. What's good and what's bad. I mean, you can get away with relative thinking when we talk about seafood and our preferences within seafood, or which team is the best team, the Cardinals or Vikings. That's an easy one, by the way. Right? So, you can get away with that, but when it comes down to what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong, it gets really sticky. Moral relativism becomes this slippery slope that if we're not careful, we can end up in areas of thinking that we never intended to. But it is something that we do every single day. Not even thinking about it, we practice moral relativism. You do it all the time. Gilbert Harmon, this really smart guy from Princeton University, he writes this about this subject. He says, moral relativism says that there's no true morality. Right? There are a variety of possible moralities or moral frames of reference, and whether something is morally right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust, is a relative matter, relative to one or another morality or moral frame of reference. So what does all that mean? It's kind of, we don't usually get this deep into philosophical thinking, but what does all that mean? Well, it means that good or bad is relative to a person's experience or frame of reference. It means that how you and I define good and bad is ultimately based on where we grew up, the things that we have learned, the people that we've been surrounded by, and the belief systems that have been instituted into our lives at a very early age. Now, I don't want to overcomplicate this, okay, because there's danger that I might. But put it this way. You believe what is good and what is bad because of the relative experiences you have had during your lifetime. So then you make judgments every single day based on what you believe to be right, what you believe to be wrong, or good and bad, regardless of whether or not someone else agrees with you. So let me give you an example. Say you're put in a position where lying to somebody will actually save them from experiencing pain. In other words, telling them the truth is going to crush them. And so you have this moral dilemma relative to this situation, right? Where you have to choose, do I lie to this person and cause them pain? Or do I tell them the truth and cause them pain? Or do I lie to them so as to allow them to escape whatever pain might come? Now, for some people, lying in this situation would actually be considered the good thing to do. And to others, lying would never be an option. That would be a bad thing to do. You see how this works? Moral relativism. Based on your experience in life, how you've been brought up, the way that you conjure up thoughts, and how you navigate life, you would make a decision. Do I lie to this person or do I not? And the person standing next to you would make the same decision, might be different. That's called moral relativism. Are you still with me? Yeah. Okay, good. Good. All right. So then the argument becomes, who is good and who is bad? Who is right and who is wrong? Now, we're in church, right? So it may seem like the answer is pretty easy. But reality proves that the answer is not as easy as we might expect, right? So we're going to get to the bottom of this today. This is an important question for us to answer. And I think you're going to find that maybe the answer isn't what you thought it would be. Right? I want us to clearly understand the question, who is good and who is bad, before I end in about 3.5 hours. Okay? No, I never do that. So to start, we're going to go back to this book that we've been in, the book of Habakkuk. Everybody say Habakkuk? Habakkuk. I do that just because it's an awesome word. It's an awesome name. That's an awesome word. Okay, there's a couple of our churches that are having twins, and I'm trying to get them to name one of their boys. Sorry, I just wanted to name them. So go ahead, grab a Bible or your fancy YouVersion app. If you don't have that, download it. It's free. Awesome resource. You can follow along that way, all right? So the book of Habakkuk is sort of obscure. Most of us maybe have never read the book of Habakkuk. We didn't even know it existed in the Bible. It's sandwiched right in the middle of the Bible. And it's this really short book. This prophet, Habakkuk, and his conversation with God, with the people of God. Now, they are in a precarious situation. The Babylonians, this massive empire that is taking over the world, is on their doorstep. They are taking over Israel, and they're scattering them throughout the Babylonian Empire. Things are bad for God's people right now. And Habakkuk has some questions because he's looking at this as a prophet going, what is going on? What is going on? Why is it that the Babylonians we're your people. Why are they overtaking us? They're killing us. They're moving us all throughout this Babylon. Why is this going on, God? And this conversation goes back and forth between Habakkuk and God. And as we come to the end of chapter 2, God begins to make comments about how the Babylonians have chosen to live and his opinions about them. In addition, these comments are just as much for the Israelites and for us, because we have bought into much of what the Babylonians believe to be right and good as well. And this is what God says in Habakkuk 2, starting verse 9. He's speaking of the Babylonians and then the Israelites who bought into this way of life. He says, what sorrow awaits you who build big houses with money gained dishonestly. You believe your wealth will buy security, putting your family's nest beyond the reach of danger. But by the murders you committed, you have shamed your name and forfeited your lives. The very stones in the walls cry out against you, and the beams and the ceilings echo the complaint. What sorrow awaits you who build cities with money gained through murder and corruption? Has not the Lord of heaven's armies promised that the wealth of nations will turn to ashes? They work so hard, but all in vain. Now, I want you to see, can you hear the moral relativism in this? He says, you believe your wealth will buy security. You build cities with money gained through murder and corruption. The Babylonians and the Israelites and us, at times, believe we got it right. We're good. That's why we're winning. The Babylonians said, we're winning. We've got this right. And they thought, we've got all this wealth. We've made it. We're the good people. We are right no matter what the cost. We have become the right people. And then God retorts in verse 14. He says, for as the waters fill the sea, the earth will be filled with an awareness of the glory of the Lord. And we'll come back to that. Skip down to verse 18. What good is an idol carved by man, or a cast image that deceives you? How foolish to trust in your own creation, a God that can't even talk. When sorrow awaits you, who say to wooden idols, wake up and save us. To speechless stone images, you say, rise up and teach us. Can an idol tell you what to do? They may be overlaid with gold and silver, but they are lifeless inside. Again, the moral relativism here. Do you see how the Babylonians are thinking, right? They believed that a carved idol would save them and teach them and bless them. They believed that was the good and right thing to do, to worship a man-made God. And God's words to Habakkuk reveal an illusion that we also buy into all the time. It's the illusion of being good. The illusion of being good. Right? God points out that Babylonians are living their lives according to the moral beliefs that they have. What they deem is good and what is bad. And what they deem is good is wealth and possessions and trust in false gods. But it's an illusion. It's not real. And unfortunately, we fall for that same illusion all the time. We have come to believe that being good is something we can achieve. In a world of absolute relativism, we have believed that we can somehow achieve goodness. Now, maybe it's not in the same manner as the Babylonians, but we believe that being good is something that we can attain based on what we've decided is moral and right. It's what I call the good person complex. And the good person complex says a few things. The first thing it says is that we are good by comparison. Right? Because good and bad are relative in our minds. We're able to compare ourselves to other people and other cultures and deem ourselves good. Right? So maybe we're not as good as Mother Teresa, but we're certainly not as bad as Hitler. Right? Or maybe we tell a little lie once in a while, but at least we didn't murder someone. Or maybe we spread a little gossip, but we haven't cheated on our spouse. So we're good by comparison. In other words, we believe we are good in comparison to other people based on our definition of good. Are you with me? The good person complex. Secondly, we've decided that being good is also a measure of moral and spiritual success. Right? When I believe that I'm or can be good, it is a sign of spiritual superiority or moral superiority. My ability to be good in the ways that I've decided, it makes me a spiritual mogul. Right? It shows that God will be more favorable to me and that I will experience His blessings in my life, or I will be more greatly respected by my peers who share the same or similar definition of what it means to be good. This happens in the church all the time. We, by comparison, we compare ourselves to each other. And we decide, oh, you're a pastor. You must be better than me. Sorry, I'm not. And nor is the person next to you, right? This was the greatest illusion the Pharisees believed. They believed that if they could live up to this code of conduct, much of which was established by them, not by God, that they would be seen as moral and superior, morally superior to everyone else, and that God would then have more favor in their lives. And Jesus comes in and he totally wrecks the whole paradigm. I mean, he's there as his greatest opponents. People can't believe it. The good person complex believes that being good is a measure of moral and spiritual success. And then last, and maybe the most dangerous, is that we often believe that good people go to heaven. We start to believe that good people go to heaven. Heaven is simply a measure of our own ability to be good. Since I'm a good person, then God has no choice but to allow me to experience bliss in the life beyond this one. Right? In short, the good person complex believes by achieving goodness in this life somehow builds credit for the next life. Based on what we believe to be good and right, we will achieve perfection after we die. Anybody ever seen the show The Good Place? Love that show. It's just fantastic. You should go watch it. The whole premise is this. People die, and then based on how good they were in life, they either go to the good place or they go to the bad place. And it makes fun of the whole thing. It's really quite funny. But as I watch the show, I'm like, this is how we think when we give in to this illusion that we are good. That we can attain goodness in its fullness. The Apostle Paul writes in regards to this good person complex in the book of Romans. Now keep in mind, right, before Paul encounters Jesus and becomes a follower of Jesus, he was a Pharisee. He fully believed being good was the goal. That I can do these things and make this happen and God will have favor on me. He fully believed his idea of what was good and right was the ticket to spiritual superiority and going to heaven one day. Now before I read what's next, I just want to warn you. You don't want to hear this. You don't want to hear this. It's likely it is going to rub you the wrong way. In fact, you're going to feel a little uncomfortable, I think, and with what Paul says. And that's okay. That's okay. But I want you to stick with me to the end because I think there is actually incredible hope and freedom in what I'm about to read. And here's what Paul writes in Romans chapter 3, starting in verse 10. He says, "No one is righteous, not even one. No one is truly wise. No one is seeking God. All have turned away. All have become useless. No one does good, not a single one." Told you wouldn't like it. I mean, he's not like, most of you don't do good. Most of you, you can't, most of you don't seek God. No one, he says. No one, and he's actually quoting a psalm in the Old Testament. This is not something Paul's just making up out of thin air. This is God's word. Because here's what Paul discovered. All of our moral relativism is irrelevant when compared to the perfection and holiness of God. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. In other words, we can compare ourselves to each other all we want, and we can make determinations about who is right and who is wrong and who is good and who is bad. But when we compare ourselves to the only true measure of morality in the universe, nobody is good. None of us in comparison to God's holiness. Our moral relativism just flies up. Who cares? It doesn't matter. And even if we wanted to somehow perfectly follow God's code of conduct for our lives, we would never be able to do it. Paul goes on in Romans 3 and he says this, "For no one can ever be made right with God by doing what the law commands. The law simply shows us how sinful we are." Do you ever think of that? That the Ten Commandments, they're really there to just show us we're not as good as we think. God reveals it in the book of Habakkuk, and Paul says it in Romans that being good is an illusion. It's relative, and no one can achieve it on their own. You can't do it. In fact, all of the Old Testament gives a sneak peek into God's holiness and reveals our inability to achieve it on our own. Now that sounds like bad news. Right? Like, that's bad news. Like, well, then there's no meaning to this life. There's no purpose to trying to do anything we might think that's good, right? And I admit, at first glance, it just doesn't seem all that great. It's not great news for us. It's pretty depressing. Paul is actually saying it is better for us to recognize how bad we are than to compare how good we are to other people. But let me tell you why this is such a great thing. It is so great to be able to look at myself and be like, you're a bad person, Ryan. It's a great thing, and I'm going to tell you why. Because Paul doesn't finish on how bad this is. Instead, he insists that we turn our attention not on our badness, but on God's goodness. Oh man, preach now. Romans 3, verse 21. Here we go. This is so good. This will change your life. That's not a joke. But now God has shown us a way to be made right with Him without keeping the requirements of the law, as was promised in the writings of Moses and the prophets long ago. Praise the Lord. The whole Old Testament, you can't do it. You can't do it. Right? We are made right, Paul says, with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who you are. For everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. Yet God, in His grace, freely makes us right in His sight. And He did this through Christ Jesus when He freed us from the penalty for our sins. Here's what Paul's saying. Paul is saying, I'm a bad, sinful person. But God's a good God. If you want to know what good is, don't look at yourself. Don't look at other people. Look at God. And because He is a good God, He did what was necessary to enable you and I to experience forgiveness and grace and freedom in the midst of our broken sinfulness. Jesus came to this earth. Jesus came to this earth not to give us another standard of moral good and bad, right and wrong. He came to this earth to do what we can't do ourselves. To fulfill the full requirements of the law, to live a perfectly good life based on God's goodness, and then He would willingly walk to His own execution to die the death that you and I deserve. To die that death, to pay the price for our sinfulness. Because we all know deep down, in our sinfulness, we deserve death. That's the only option. Justice demands that our wrongdoings be punished, yet Jesus would take that justice on Himself for you, for me. He would bear the weight of the penalty of our sinfulness and die the death we deserve. And then if that weren't enough, He would go to the grave and be buried there 3 days and then raise again, resurrected from the dead to give us, bad, sinful people, the hope of a life beyond this one. Amen. Listen, if you hear nothing else today, and maybe you haven't heard anything after this point, if you hear nothing else, I want you to hear this. You can't experience the enormous goodness of God until you stop believing the illusion that you're good. You can't experience God's full goodness until you stop believing the illusion that we somehow figured it out. That we're better than everybody else. That we're the good people and they're the bad people. You cannot experience God's goodness and grace and fullness of life until you admit, I am sinful. I can't do it. I can't be good based on the standard of who God is. And that is so freeing. Because you might spend your entire life trying to be something you never could be in the first place. And that is exhausting. And that's why Jesus says, I want you who are weary and have heavy burdens to come to me, and I will give you rest. Stop trying so hard to be something you're never able to be. Habakkuk, the Israelites, the Babylonians, they believed they were living a good life, but it was relative only to their experience. And compared to God, it was far from good, which is why God ends chapter 2 by saying these words. He says, but the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. In other words, instead of believing the illusion of our own goodness, God asks us to sit silently before him and admire and worship and be in awe of his holiness and his grace in the midst of our own sinfulness. I don't know about you, but it is so easy to fall into this trap when we start believing that we are somehow better than everybody else. We're not. And what God requires of us is not to fulfill the law. It's not to be morally superior. That's not what God requires of us. What God requires of us is to have faith in his Son, Jesus Christ, who gave his life for you and for me. That's it. The whole Christian life revolves around that. That I am sinful, that Jesus is a Savior who gives forgiveness freely, and that I can rest in knowing that I am saved. That's it. And so if you've not done that, if you've not taken that step, if you've not said, man, I am so tired in this life, trying to be something I never could in the first place, God continuously reaches out to you and says, come to me, and I will give you rest. The Bible says if we believe in our hearts, if we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord, he will save. That we can experience that same freedom. So to say, how many of you get a chance to do that today? But my hope for all of us is that maybe today we will walk out of this room with a little bit lighter step, knowing that God is so good, and we can trust that. Let's pray. Father, there's some heavy lifting this morning with this message. And quite honestly, in our culture today, this is kind of a controversial message, and that's okay. But I am so grateful that your truth is so powerful in our lives. And that when we're willing to admit that, man, we don't have it all together, that we're sinful, that we make mistakes, that we've fallen short, you pick us up, God. You went to the cross for people who are willing to admit we're not as good as we once thought. And that in that place there's incredible freedom, there's forgiveness, there's grace, there's hope. So this morning, we just want to rest in that. And if you're here today and you have not taken that step to say, I am going to follow you, Jesus. I believe you are who you say you are. I believe that you came for me. You died a death for me. I just want you to silently just pray these words to yourself. Say, Lord, I'm sinful. I have fallen short. But I believe that you died for my sins. That you died for my life. And so I place my faith in you today. I place a stake in the sand and say, I will follow you and only you. Give me rest. For all of us in this room to just take a deep breath and be reminded of how good and gracious and kind God is. That he wouldn't leave us to ourselves, but he would come for us. God, we love you. We worship you. We stand silent before you in your holiness this morning. It's in Jesus Christ's name.